I'm leaving Krakow on an overnight train to Prague. It's very romantic, I guess. I have my own room here. There's 4 beds. This bed right here that I made. There's a bed up on the top where through my backpack, and another bed up here, and one here. Actually, during the day, these beds are they're just kind of like couches. So they convert to beds. Closer to 11 o'clock right now. The train seemed to leave late, and at night, and I will arrive in Prague like at 7, maybe 8 in the morning. So it's great because it costs me less actually to add the addition of having a bed here than it did to pay for a bed at a hostel. So perfect. And I get all this extra time by not losing a day. So as you see, I can, and I have locked the door. There's like 2 lock system. There's this little chain dealio, and then there's this kind of thing that hooks in with some kind of bolts that go through this that connects in. So we're good. We're good. We're good and we're safe. And we're on our way.
And this is the first defenestration in 1419. Now, does anybody know what a defenestration is?
Yes.
Yeah, what's a defenestration?
Throw people out the window.
Exactly, it's throwing people out of a window. So, the first Prague defenestration in 1419, 2 Catholic councillors get thrown out the window of the new town hall, and just in case height and gravity don't do their job, they stand underneath the windows with some giant spikes, which prove very, very effective. Now, you don't just skewer some Catholic priests and get away with it. So the Hussites start fortifying towns. They really start rebelling. But the Pope gets word of this, and he declares this land a heretic country. And he sends crusade after crusade to quash the Hussite rebellion. And after 15 years, known as the Hussite Wars, after 15 years, well, everybody got a bit tired. And nobody really won. But the Hussites were allowed to remain so long as they kept quiet. In 1618, we have the second defenestration of Prague. The Hussites storm the castle looking for the king, but the king's in Vienna, and so they grab 2 more Catholic priests, and they chuck them out the window, and their secretary just for good measure. Talk about wrong time, wrong place. But this time, the Hussites hadn't planned it properly, and instead of giant spikes, there was a huge pile of manure. So the Czechs bounced. No more of those, I promise. Okay, but the Catholic priests actually survived the fall. And so the Catholic Church, they were screaming, it's a miracle, God is on our side, our cause is just, we have been venerated, these angels have been sent down to save these priests, it's a miracle. The Hussites are shouting, no, it was poo. But it was too late. And 2 years later, they had rounded up, the Catholic Church had rounded up 27 of the leading Hussites, and in 1620 they had them all executed here in the old town square. Now, if you'll notice, there are 27 white crosses on the floor in the old town square, and that is to represent these 27 Hussite leaders. But this was to spark the 30 Years' War. Now, the 30 Years' War was one of the most bloody and most hellish wars Europe was ever to see. In fact, the death toll was never to be seen again until World War I. So 10% of the population of Central Europe were killed. That's 7.5 million people. A third of all towns were completely destroyed. And what was the outcome of this senseless religious battle? 30 years of warring on and on? Absolutely nothing. Nobody won. Everybody got tired and they called it a truce. Until in 1989, some of the most peaceful protests ever seen in the world. It was so smooth, the transition from communism to democracy, that they named it the Velvet Revolution. So in 1989, they finally had democracy and they finally had freedom here in Prague. Now, 4 years later, in 1993, the Czechs and the Slovaks, they're sat down at dinner, they're having a chat, and suddenly they decide, think we need to take a break. It's not you, it's me. I just need some me time, you know. I need to find out who I really am. I need to do this on my own for a bit. And so just as smooth as the Velvet Revolution, we get the Velvet Divorce in 1993. And so Slovakia and the Czech Republic, the countries that we now know today, first were formed. It's Pablo Picasso, and he had a mate called Georges Braque. And they started a new movement in art, and this new movement was known as Cubism. Now, Cubism swept across Europe, particularly amongst the artists and amongst the sculptors. But it was only here, in this country, in this city, that they had a go at Cubist architecture. So you really can't see it anywhere else in the world. We don't know why no one else tried it, and we don't know why the Czechs seem to love it, but they really made a good go of it. And this is one of the examples of Cubist architecture. In fact, if you go to the top floor, there's a cafe there. It's a Cubist cafe. It's one of the only Cubist interiors remaining here in Prague. In fact, you can have a Cubist coffee at a Cubist table underneath a giant Cubist chandelier. It's really great. And if you've really got into it, you can go to the souvenir shop just there and you can buy yourself Cubist wallpaper and Cubist curtains and Cubist underwear and everything Cubist. It makes your mind spin. It's wonderful. You can really get into the Cubist spirit. Now, if you now pointed it out, you'll notice that this style of architecture is all over this city. So really keep your eyes peeled and you'll start to spot it. And yeah, it's the only place in the world that you'll get to see it.
Here in Letenska Sady Park, which is a pretty big park that's behind me, which you can't see very much, but the view is actually ahead of me here. There's a huge Metrodome. It's a huge Metrodome over here. This used to be the location of a gigantic Stalin statue, which used to be right up here that overlooked the city. It's a view of the city.
Now, hiding in the attic of the old new synagogue is the golem. Now, there's nothing precious about this golem. In fact, in the 16th century, there was a rabbi known as Rabbi Lowe, and he decided that the people of the Jewish district here in Prague needed protecting. And so he went down to the banks of the Vltava River, and he dug up some clay, and he made a man. He made a man as strong as 10 men. And when he put an activation prayer into the golem's mouth, the golem would come alive and would patrol the streets of the Jewish district, protecting the Jewish people. But unfortunately, one Sabbath day, Rabbi Lowe forgot to remove the activation prayer, and so the golem went crazy. He started tearing through the Jewish district, started tearing up trees. He was knocking down buildings. The Jewish people were starting to fear for their lives. The golem had turned on them. They started chasing after Rabbi Lowe. Rabbi Lowe, Rabbi Lowe, the golem's gone mad. You've forgotten to take the prayer out of his mouth. He's save us, he's going to kill us all. So Rabbi Lowe has to go chasing after the golem, and he finally catches him, and he takes the prayer out of his mouth, and he slaps him on the wrist, and he exiles him to the attic of the old new synagogue. And the golem is still there today. Now, none of you believe me. Now, none of you believe me, but apparently during the Nazi occupation, the Nazi soldiers heard about the story of the golem, and they thought, nonsense, or even if it's true, they can take him on, they're the Nazi elite, you know. And so a soldier got sent up to the attic of the old new synagogue, and he never came back down.